Good morning. Our learning is Leila Nishmas Bin Delmariam Bas Kaman Ruvain Hornisham Shem Aliyah. We are beginning the 15th parak of Shabbos, the parak of Eluk Sharm. We're at the Mishnah in the middle of Kufiyot Aleph Amud Beis. We're going to talk about tying knots that are permitted, knots that are forbidden. A lot of questions, a lot of relevant questions. Are you allowed to tie your shoes? Are you allowed to tie your garbage bag? Right, that's an important one. Okay, so let's begin. So the Eluk Sharm Shechayav and Aleim. These are the knots which one is liable. Kesher Hagamalim, Kesher Sapanim, the camel driver's knot and the sailor's knot. Uchshem Shehu, and we're going to define exactly what those are. Uchshem Shehu Chayav al Kishurin, just as one is liable for tying them. Kachu Chayav al Ater, and similarly one is liable for untying them. Okay, Rameir disagrees. He says, "Kol kesher shu yachal atir v'achas me'adav." His criteria is not the same as the Tanakama. His criteria is any knot that could be untied with one hand. In chayav and love, you are not going to be chayav for. The Gemara is going to explain what Rameir actually holds. Says the Gemara, "My kesher hagamalim kesher sapanim." What exactly is the camel driver's knot and the sailor's knot? Ilam akitra the katra bizmama. If you say it's the knot that is tied through the nose ring, in other words, you have a nose ring, and then you have something which is attached to the nose ring. The kitra, that's the camel knot. The kitra de katra istrida, and it's the knot that is tied through the ship's ring. In other words, the ship has a ring attached to the end, and then there's a knot, but then there's a rope attached to that with like an anchor or something to be attached to the dock. So those are impermanent knots. In other words, those strings, those ropes are going to be tied and untied all the time. El kitzer desmama gufa. Rather, we're talking about the nose ring itself. In other words, the camel has a ring in its nose. That ring is not necessarily a metal ring. Sometimes it's a rope. That rope stays there all the time. Istrida gufa, and the ship's ring. Again, the ship also has a ring. It's not necessarily a metal ring, but it has something attached to the ship itself, and you attach to that rope to that ring, you attach another rope. It's the one that goes into the ship, into the camel. That's something which stays forever, and therefore you are going to be chayav. Okay, chayav means you're going to be chayav b'chatas if you do it by mistake. Okay, the Gemara now quotes Rameir Omer kol kesher, any knot that could be untied with one hand. The brother Amar Acha asks, Aniva the Rameir, what about tying a bow? According to Rameir, so is it because you can untie the knot? So the reasoning of Rameir, again, he said anything that could be untied with one hand. Is the reasoning because it could be untied with one hand? And here too you could do so. A bow, you could just pull the string and the whole thing is undone. Or is it because it's not tight, and this is something which is tight, and therefore you're going to be chayav? Teku, the Gemara leaves this unresolved. So before we see the next Mishnah, just want to point out there's machlokas Rishonim, there's debate among the Rishonim as to whether the Tanakama, the Chachamim, which is the view we go like, when they say you are going to be chayav for the knot of a sailor or the knot of a camel, is it because it's a professional knot, or is it because it's something which lasts for a long time? That is machlokas. One way or another, even if it's not chayav d'oraisa, you're still going to be chayav midrabanan. Even according to the more stringent opinion, it says only because it's a professional knot, we'll still say you're going to be chayav midrabanan for these knots. If it's anything that's going to last. So any knot that's going to last, okay, let's go a little further. We'll unpack that a little bit more. It says in the Mishnah, there are knots for which one is not liable, like the camel driver's knot and the sailor's knot. Kosheres isha miftach chaluka, a woman may tie the opening of her shirt. It's not a shirt, it's like basically some form of like an apron, which has strings on both sides, and those both get tied. The chute sevacha, and the strings of a hat, okay? So she has a hat on and she ties on the bottom. Vishal piskia, or of a girdle, ritzuas minal of a sandal, straps of a shoe or sandal, venodos yain meshemen, leather canteens of wine or oil. They would have a string on top, they'd have a rope on top that would be tied. Ukder shabas, or a pot of meat. The way, we have all these like different plasticware that just like snaps together and things like that. How do they keep their things together? They tied it, they made a tie, but obviously that tie is going to be undone rather sooner. A person thought to tie a rope in front of the stall of an animal to prevent it from going out. Hagufa Kasha, the Gemara asks a question. The Mishnah itself is an intrinsic contradiction. It begins by saying Yesh Sharm Shen Chayav Lim Kesher Hagmal Kesher Sapanim. The Mishnah begins by saying there are knots for which one is not liable for the as they are for. The Mishnah begins by saying that there are knots for which one is not liable. like the ones in the first Mishnah, which you are chayiv midaraisa, but the implication is chiyuva hu deleka. There's no liability ha isura ika. There's still going to be a prohibition. V'hadotani, the very next line it says kosheres isha miftach chaluka. It says a woman may open the opening of her shirt. Afilu chatchila. There, the implication is she's allowed to do so. Not that you're going to be chayiv at all, right? Again, the first line of the Mishnah says that there are cases which you're not going to be chayiv midaraisa, implying that you are going to be chayiv midarabanan. And then the next line, when it starts giving the examples, it says you could do this lechatchila. You're allowed to do this. There's no problem whatsoever. So which one is it? Is it that you're going to be chayiv midarabanan, that it's still forbidden rabbinically, or is it permitted across the board? So the Gemara says we're missing. You have to reread the Mishnah. This is the way to read the Mishnah. There are knots for which one is not liable, like the doraisa ones, like the camel driver's knot and the sailor's knot. Umaynihu, and what are they? We're now in Kofyu Beis, Amud Aleph, Kitra de Katra Bizmama. That's the knot which is tied through the nose ring. The Kitra de Katra Bistrida, and the knot which is tied through the ship's ring. Chiyuvu de Leka Haisura Ika. So midoraisa, you're going to be higher for the knot in the camel's nose or the knot on the ship itself. Midarabanan, you're going to be higher for the rope that is attached to that. Okay, because that's still going to be a semi-permanent knot. Okay, v'yesh mitar lechatchila, and there are those which are permitted across the board. Umaynihu, what are they? Kosheres miftechei chaluka. A woman's allowed to tie the opening of her shirt. So basically, you have three levels. There's chiyuv d'oraisa, you have chiyuv d'rabanan, rabbinic obligation. And those are things which are not going to be, which are knots, but they're not knots which stay forever. They're not permanent, but you're still going to be chayiv. What is the threshold for a person to be chayiv? So according to, it's machlokas, but according to Ashkenazi poskim, anything that is going to last for more than one day, any knot that lasts for more than 24 hours is going to be considered a rabbinic prohibition. So included in that, for example, is putting a knot on your shoe. If you tie your shoes on Shabbos, it's important not to make a double knot. Rather, what you make is like a slip knot, a slip knot, just like the cross, you put the strings across, then two bows. Basically, a bow is going to be okay, but once you do a knot on top of that bow, that is a knot which could easily last for 24 hours, and that would be forbidden rabbinically. Very, very important to keep in mind. And unfortunately, people don't always know this, and they tie their shoes regularly, but that would be forbidden. There is a very interesting question, maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow, about even a single tie, but if it's going to last for 24 hours. So for example, when you tie your garbage, let's say you take your garbage out and you have those strings at the top, so there you can do so on your shoes you can do a bow because the bow is going to come out and the goal is for it to come out. What about when you do a bow on top of a garbage bag, and the garbage bag, you're never going to see this garbage bag again. It's going to sit in your garbage, garbage pail, and it's going to last forever. Is that problematic? In other words, is it just about the type of knot, or is it the context as well that we take into account? So we'll address that question hopefully tomorrow. Let's go a little bit further. Miftach chaluka, the opening of her shirt. Pshita, the Gemara says, of course, it's obvious she's allowed to do the opening of her shirt because that's something which gets open and closed. In the beginning of the day, she gets dressed, takes it off later, and so of course, it's going to be permitted. So the Gemara says, "Lotzricha de islay trei dashi." The shirt has two straps. Maudatim, I would have thought chanabidayu batule mavtil. She's going to leave one strap tied all the time. In other words, since you have two straps, so you can always leave one tied and then just only tie one of them. And therefore, you would think that one of them is going to be tied permanently. Kamash Milan. The Gemara says no. We could assume that she is going to untie both of them, and therefore it is going to be allowed. Okay, let's stop here. Have a great day.